I want to talk about the anthropology of the human person, and there's three different approaches I want to take. This is really strong. So on the first one, you should have a copy of my paper. It's a published paper in the materials, okay? I'm not going to read this paper, but I'm going to take you through my main arguments so you know where I'm coming from, and I'm going to then give you another approach to this anthropological question. So what I'm doing in this paper is I come into the introduction about new human rights, what are they, and basically on the international scale, they have not been accepted, sexual orientation, gender identity, you've got this movement for same-sex marriage. You also have, as a part of this sexual orientation, questions are coming up as to whether one of those orientations are pedophilia. If you look in my footnotes, you'll see that there is a movement, quite a strong movement, pedophilia movement going on right now. And so that seems to me to be another challenge that will be coming for us to meet. If you go to page 154 of that article, I basically say that the main argument. So the argues that, and I'm going to look at the International Bill of Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, when considered as an integral whole, reveal an interconnectedness between the nature and meaning of the human person, his or her human dignity, as well as the rights of the family, parents, and children. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you through some of these key documents chronologically. So the first document I take you through is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. Not a perfect document, but has some wonderful things in there. What do I talk about first? Due to this understanding of gender ideology, where from the ideological perspective, gender means man, woman, and other. That's distinct from what our professor had talked about using gender linguistically. I'm talking ideologically. There's an attack on this foundation. So in the human person and his or her dignity, the first thing I talk about is the human person, male and female. Equal rights of men and women, that's in the document. Then I move on and I talk about discrimination on the grounds of sex, because now we're not using sex anymore, we're using gender, and some of this is mixed into ideology. I then go into the 1966 covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Okay? If you go to the top of 155, what I'm doing is I'm taking you through the inherent dignity principle. The UDHR recognizes the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. I then take you down to another principle about rights derived from the inherent dignity of the human person. Why is that important? Because we do have right now a movement that's using dignity as a right, the dignity to die, etc. What these documents talk about is an inherent dignity. It also talks about duties. Why am I highlighting duties? Because we hear about this absolute rights. We never hear about duties. Duties are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, duties to others and the community. I then move to one of the key paragraphs that no other document, human rights document has, and it's the following. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Wow. Okay? When you look at that, you can see that there's some wonderful stuff in there, and the source of that was Charles Malik, a Christian who had Lebanese, one of the drafters of the document, and throughout the whole negotiations of this document that took place within the Commission on Human Rights, one of the first acts of that commission within the United Nations, had said on the first day, how do we talk about rights without talking about what is man? And he was a philosopher, so eventually he got into negotiations and started to understand that they weren't there to discuss philosophical notions, but he never gave up. And it was due to him that this is here, and in one of his writings after, he said the reason that Article 1 exists is because it's a Christian natural law perspective. Okay, so that's Charles Malik. It's not perfect, but we've got some beautiful things. Okay, so we look at it and we say endowed with reason and conscience. Okay, well, and then looking at the male and female, looking at the spirit of brotherhood, we can say that by nature, man, free, endowed with reason and conscience, is relational. Male, female. Here's our anthropology that's being attacked. Okay, what do we do with this? You can flesh this out in your own, the states are free to flesh this out and interpret how they want. Following this line of reasoning, one could, for example, talk about in relation with self and others, is a personally responsible to seek the truth, respond to the interior call to do good. Arguably, the term inherent dignity refers to the unique excellence of the personhood, the innate value of the person as someone and not simply something, an absoluteness not found in other beings. This gives rise to specific moral requirements, okay, that things ought not to be done to any person and certain other things ought to be done for every person. Okay, so these are the type of how you can flesh this out. In a document called The Family and Human Rights by the Pontifical Council for the Family, when they analyzed this document, they said, you know, this document is consistent with a Christian anthropology. It's not perfect. And they used another term called acquired dignity. So there's inherent dignity, and that's getting at the reason and conscience by nature what we have. And they talked about acquired dignity as making good choices. So you're using that reason and conscience, and you're acting in accordance with right reason. So those things he or she ought to do and refraining from other things that she ought not to do. So Tom has his inherent dignity as a human person that remains, and he needs to be respected as a person, but if he rapes Susie, that was a really bad choice, and he's going to be punished for that. So they talk about inherent human dignity and acquired dignity. The one problem that you'll see in this, which is brought up in this one cornerstone paragraph, all human beings are born. Some want to interpret born as physical birth, and in this I explain it's a moral birth that they're talking about because it doesn't make any sense because we are not born into equal circumstances. Okay? So it's we are born free and equal in dignity and rights, but it's a moral birth, a deep moral quality. Okay. Once going from there, I move into the protection of the family and based on marriage, because this is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You go from Article 1 into you go from the preamble into the inherency principle. You then go into that major Article 1 on the human person. And then you're going to move into Article 16, which talks about marriage. And I have that on page 156 of your paper. And it's at the bottom. Men and women of full age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. The next paragraph is talking about the consent issue, must be free and full consent. And the last paragraph is perhaps one of the most quoted paragraphs in international fora. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled by protection by society and the state. Wow. We've got again, some beautiful wording there. So I look at that, and I've got this inherent dignity of the human person. We got male, female, endowed with reason and conscience. We know the human person is relational. Well, what do we mean in relational? Well, we come to this wonderful paragraph, and it's men and women in the French version. The original version of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a man and a woman. Okay? So when you look at Article 16, you can see a complementarity in their sexual dimensions. It's not referring to same-sex marriage. When you look at the natural and fundamental unit of society, go back to Article 1, go back to inherent dignity, you're not going to get same-sex marriage from an interpretation on this if you're using the ordinary words and common sense. I do a deeper reflection on this, talking about how you can look at this, what I've done so far, just Article 1 and Article 16, and talk about the object of marriage as being basically this reciprocal and mutual exchange between persons and their femininity and masculinity. I'll let you read that. That's more fleshing out what is in the document itself. I also talk about the three goods which you could bring out from this and tied to fidelity. What I want to do now is I want to take you to the next section, which is I go from the human person, relational, into the family, marriage. So marriage between a man and a woman creates your family. Now we're moving into parental rights and duties. And in this discussion, I go to Article 26, which is further down in the UDHR, and that has parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. A prior right acknowledges the subsidiarity principle and role of the state in the sense that parents give life to the child, they have the primary and inalienable duty and right to educate their child and in conformity with their moral and religious convictions. Now, if you go into the two 1966 covenants that followed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 20 years later, they go into this more specifically and reaffirm not only the definition of the family, they also reaffirm the parents' right to choose their education, and specifically moral and religious. Now, there's one principle I think that we have to take from this when we're talking about parents' prior right is to choose their child's education reaffirms the principle and is called integral human procreation. Not just human procreation, integral. Because we're dealing with not just having a baby, but that you're there to accept, to love, nurture, educate, guide, and accompany the child throughout his or her entire development process. Okay? Then I move into the child's rights and duties, and the parental rights are necessarily united with the rights of the child. I move into one of the major conventions. It's widely ratified, 193. The United States has signed but not ratified it, and the convention in itself is not perfect. It has some troublesome provisions. The Holy See acceded to this convention with reservations. I think the biggest problem with this convention is not the convention itself, although it is problematic, is the committee interpretations. It establishes a committee, and the committee has basically interpreted this convention to actually create a parallel convention. But when you look at the text, and this whole paper is bringing you back to the text, you're talking about this protection, number one, that the mother and child relationship, pregnancy is a relationship between a mother and child, and that is seen in international law, and we can see it all the time with respect to the prohibition of the death penalty of a pregnant woman. Why? Because there's a baby. There's an innocent baby, so she's in relationship. Also, we have within the documents, the UDHR, this motherhood and childhood entitled to special care and assistance. When you get to the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the preamble says that there must be legal protections for the child before as well as after birth. Also, no discrimination based on sex or birth. Okay, so that's with respect to sex selection of children. There's also a section on health that talks about the highest attainable standard of health, prenatal and postnatal. And so when this convention, you take it and you look at Article 6, too, that talks about the right to life, survival, and development. If you take the preamble, you go back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is cited in its preamble. You look at the international covenants, which again are cited in its preamble. You look at these right to life sections, you've got the right to life of a child, ordinary meaning of the text. Okay? Now, the thing about the children's rights, it has to be seen within the family. The rights and duties of the child are within the family, and that is seen in the CRC. So the CRC acknowledges that the child, for the full and harmonious development of his or her personality, should grow up in a family environment, in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. Now, this does not completely use the terminology of natural and fundamental family. However, because it has cited the UDHR, that comes into the picture. So now we've got not only family form, there's only one family form protected in international law. There's only one family. That's man and woman, marriage. That's your family that's protected in international law. Now, if there are other states in the world that are giving civil partnerships or any other partnerships to whatever relationships or resources to other relationships, it would seem to me that you would be bound to look at your international obligations and say, why do I have to protect this new relationship? Does it conflict with this fundamental relationship that has to be protected? We have a legal obligation to protect with our resources, and then analyze it in that fashion. Okay, so as you go on, I finish by talking about how the family, the child cannot be protected unless the family is fully protected, and I'll leave the rest of that argument for you to read. In this paper, it goes on to some objections and responses and implications for lawmaking, and I won't go into that now because I want to concentrate on the anthropology. That's one way to do the anthropology, where you go chronologically through the documents. I want to show you another way. This is the Holy See's second, they acceded to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is their second report to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and this is how they did it. Okay, so as you can see, we've got here talking about the dignity. What they do here is they say, listen, the Committee on the Right, first of all, they go through their reservations. We're going to keep our reservations on a parental authority, family planning, and the laws of Vatican City State, and we need these reservations even more because of these ambiguous interpretations, erroneous interpretations, new wording that the committee is coming up with. And so this is their conversation they're going to have with the committee. They then remind the committee about the international interpretation rules. There's rules of interpretation for treaties. They go through that and they say, listen, according to these rules of interpretation, I mean, when you're looking at this convention, here are some key principles. The committee, by the way, has created its own principle. It's got a main principle as the best interest of the child, a main principle as participation or freedom of expression of the child, and you know as a fetus you're not talking a lot, so that kind of discounts those people for that one. And then you have the right to life, but they say that they're neutral on abortion, and there's one more, and I'll get to that in a second. So as we go through this is what the Holy See is going to say now to the committee. They're going to say, well, listen, have you thought about this principle, the dignity of the child? And they say, the sources of the rights of the child is his inherent dignity as a human being created in the image and likeness of God. The child's rights and duties flow from this source and therefore precede any convention or political agreement. This means that from the moment of conception, the child in the first instance has inherent dignity as a human person, by nature a social being endowed with intelligence and free will, having a fundamental right to life, survival, and development. These natural rights and duties, in turn, are intrinsically linked to the natural duties and rights of the child's parents. And it goes on. That's the first paragraph. And it says, hello, committee, let me show you where this is in international law. The CR, and then this is the second paragraph. The Convention affirms the recognition of the inherent dignity of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. The Holy See is picking up on the inherent dignity principle, then goes to the fundamental rights and dignity and worth of the human person, brings back to you Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as endowed with reason and conscience, and I can say to you that in the international form, when you read these documents, frequently, if not 99% of the time, endowed with reason and conscience when they cite part of that article is missing in the documents. It's like it doesn't exist. The UDHR also affirms not only the rights of the human person, but duties. Okay. Then the Holy See goes on to another principle, the child's rights and duties within the context of the family. It gives its own version from a natural law perspective, common sense. Children's rights cannot be seen outside the context of the family, the first and most vital unit of society. For that reason, protection of children's rights cannot become fully effective unless the family and its rights are fully respected. And so you'd say, well, where do you get that in the documents? You go back to the Convention on the Rights of the Child for the full and harmonious development of his or her personality, go back to that phrase, and then go back to the Convention itself and see specific reference to family and parents to be found in 18 of the 54 articles. Okay? If you go on, the Holy See will also talk about the child's rights and duties require the special protection and promotion of the family. What does it do? It says the family based on marriage is a natural society that exists prior to the state or any other community and has inherent rights which are inalienable. Talks about marriage as this union of life and complementarity between a man and woman. You're saying, okay, where did you get that? Well, you go back to the documents I've cited, and that's what the Holy See does. The Convention on the Rights of the Child recognizes that the family, quotation, as the fundamental group of society and the natural environment for the growth and well-being of all its members, okay? It goes on and it talks about the child's well-being. It then brings, in the child's well-being, talks about how the family and the parents are the first protector of that child's life. So can be no human embryo manipulation, destruction, abortion, neglect, physical or sexual abuse. Where do you get that? You then now go into the documents to talk about those right to life sections that I went through before. And then the document talks about the child's right and duties as regards life and duties in a more developed fashion. And then we'll talk about the right and duty of the child and the parent's duties to educate. And then it cites these beautiful sections that talk about the parent's prior right to choose the kind of education for its children. It finishes with the child's right and duty as regards religious freedom and parents' duties and rights with respect to that, and then how that is supported in international law. So that's another way to do this anthropological argument the Holy See has beautifully done in its document. I want to finish with one third way that has just recently been done. It's called the Declaration on the Rights of the Family, signed by legislative representatives. And so this declaration is 2 pages here, but it's really front and back, 1 page. It's being circulated amongst parliamentarians around the world, all parliamentarians of goodwill. And the first paragraph is, we democratically elected members of parliament worldwide solemnly reaffirm what has long been acknowledged in international law, namely, that the family based on marriage between one man and one woman is a natural and fundamental unit of society entitled to protection by society and the state. What they then do is, in 2 paragraphs, they're reaffirming the anthropological basis that I talked about. They say, accordingly, we reaffirm the following legal principles enshrined in the International Bill of Rights. Every human being by nature in all stages of life is endowed with reason, conscience, and free will. All human beings, both male and female, and this goes on to the principles that I've already talked about. They then say, we are also reiterating the rights protected in the Bill of Human Rights and the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child. And not every provision on the rights of the child, it goes through and talks about marriage, it talks about the family as a natural and fundamental unit of society, talks about mothers and fathers having a special care and assistance, right to life commencing from the moment of conception until natural death. Both mothers and parents, mothers and fathers have a responsibility to protect their child. That means from conception, to educate them. And then we have every child has a right to a family and to know and be cared for by his or her mother and father. To know and be cared for by his or her mother and father is right from the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this is the declaration that's being signed right now globally. So it's 3 different ways of trying to articulate the anthropology of the human person that has to be at the source of human rights, or human rights mean nothing. Thank you.